The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Today's world news, what it means, where it's taking us.
I bring you the one and only possible message of world peace.
This is a message of hope, tremendous hope. And he said unto me, you must prophesy again.
The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
So we've got a $2 trillion deficit, and if we don't do something about this deficit, the country's going bankrupt. I mean, it's really astounding that the interest payments alone on the national debt exceed the Defense Department budget, which is shocking because we spend a lot of money on defense, but and if that just keeps going, we're essentially going to bankrupt the country. So what I really want to say is, like, it's not optional for us to reduce the federal expenses. It's essential.
We as a country are $36 trillion in debt. That is such a stunning amount of money. It's absolutely staggering to even comprehend how we as a people, we as a country, found ourselves here. This is not a Democrat problem. This is not a Republican problem. This is an American problem. In 2025, interest payments are projected to be $952 billion, which is more than our entire military budget. In 2026, it will be $1 trillion. And by 2035, $1.8 trillion. Over the next decade, total interest payments are projected to be $13.8 trillion.
It strikes me as breathtakingly ironic. The cynic might say cynical, that the people who are screaming so loudly about President Trump's decision to audit federal spending are the very same people under President Biden who wanted to hire 80,000 new IRS agents with guns to audit the American people. As I've said before, if it weren't for double standards, there wouldn't be any standards at all in this town.
Now, one thing also that Elon hasn't really mentioned are the groups of people that are getting some of these payments. They're ridiculous. And we're talking about billions of dollars that we've already found. We found fraud and abuse, but we're talking about tens of billions of dollars that we've already found. And now a judge who's an activist judge wants to try and stop us from doing this. Why? Why would they want to do that? I campaigned on this. I campaigned on the fact that I said government is corrupt. And it is very corrupt. It's very, very, it's also foolish. As an example, a man has a contract for 3 months and the contract ends, but they keep paying him for the next 20 years. I think there's a lot of kickback here. I see a lot of kickback here.
There's a lot of kickbacks.
Tremendous kickback, because nobody could be so stupid to give out some of these contracts. Yes. So he has to get a kickback.
Who would have ever thought that DOGE and a guy named Elon Musk would expose so much of America's sickness? There's a lot of different angles to this story. And in one sense, you're cheering them on. You're excited to see someone finally address the elephant in the room. $36 trillion in debt. You heard Marjorie Taylor Greene say there that over the next 10 years, we pay $13.8 trillion just in interest. It's unsustainable. America's going bankrupt. It is on the road to ruin. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. We appreciate you joining us on today's show. You can get to the live video stream of this program at trumpetdaily.com or at the Rumble channel. Just go to rumble.com/Trumpet Daily, or you can do Live from America TV or Rumble, the Rumble channel, LFA TV. Just look for that over at Rumble. So obviously, like I say, it rips the scab off the wound, and you see it. You see it oozing all kinds of sickness and disease. And the Democrats, they're obviously unleashing. I mean, there's already all these lawsuits, and they've probably got hundreds more where that came from. The strategy is to slow down the Trump agenda, to slow down Elon Musk. I mean, in a more sane time, you'd have judges just dismissing these cases before they even got to the courtroom, because they're all frivolous cases. They're all politically motivated, and they're all meant to, well, basically, you've got some low-level, no-name judge who's helping himself to the authority of the presidency, the president of the United States. Imagine a judge telling a president, you put this website back up. You spend this money on this. You don't spend money over here. Some judge has that power, that authority? Of course not. But like as I said yesterday, just like with so many of these deranged tactics, they backfire, oftentimes in a spectacular way. And probably what it's leading to, as I suggested earlier this week, is, the Supreme Court weighing in and giving some kind of a blanket ruling that puts an end to this lawfare. What was amazing to me as I watched this stunning presser, you've got President Trump at his desk in the Oval Office. This time he's joined by Elon Musk and his son, by the way. Now, these two men are not perfect family men, but it is nice at least to see, men that have produced something and that are thinking about their next generation, providing for their kids. So many of the representatives in Washington, they're engaged in lifestyles that are hardly traditional, let's just put it that way. But as I sat there listening to this 30-minute presser, I know I touched on this yesterday, but how could you disagree with this? You listen to the tone of the reporters, it's mind-boggling. You look at the headline on the front page of the New York Times today. Elon Musk says this, and this without evidence. Without evidence? They're uncovering corruption on a massive level. Donald Trump said himself yesterday, I knew it would be bad, not this bad. And the receipts, you're hearing them all over conservative media. Yeah, millions going here, millions going there. Overseas, a lot of the fraud, people just receiving blank checks from America, they're not even in the United States. Not that fraud here is any better, but you would hope, if you're just putting America first, you would hope that if there's a mistake, a miscalculation, that if someone's going to benefit, quote unquote, it would be an American. But no. It's just money that's going all over the world. And judges that are ruling against Donald Trump and the Trump administration, we want the money to continue to fly everywhere. We want blank checks just floating all over the place. CBS News says a federal judge on Tuesday ordered the Department of Health and Human Services and the CDC to restore web pages and data that had been scrubbed in compliance with President Trump's executive order on gender ideology. So here again, you would think that they wouldn't be able to, some no-name judge wouldn't be able to come along and say, you know what, you've got to put these websites back up that teach young people, how to become a transgender. How much longer does this go on? In some ways, as I say, it's encouraging. You're somewhat heartened by the fact that at least a great evil is being confronted. But at the same time, the more you tear the scab off, the more you see that it's like God said to Ezekiel in Ezekiel 8, come back and look at this hole in the wall, and I'll show you even greater abominations. How do you survive if you're paying $1 trillion per year in interest, if you're paying more in interest than you are on the national defense? How do you survive that? Scott Jennings on CNN, he's kind of the lone conservative on those many panels that they have, and he's talking about these judges usurping the authority of the President of the United States, these unelected judges. Clip 14.
It is the executive branch's job to figure out how to spend money once it is appropriated by Congress. And sometimes they spend money that's not been appropriated. But the correct political control is between the executive and the Congress.
I want to return to that. There are not repercussions. You get away with it.
I get it. You want individual federal judges who hate Donald Trump.
No, I don't.
To tie him up for 4 years.
No, I don't.
If you want a big policy questions decided, let the Supreme Court do it. But in the interim, the executive has to be allowed to govern.
Am I wrong about that?
Well, you're supposed to comply, but Scott's absolutely right in that the court cannot say you have to spend these dollars today. So as a governor, I dealt with this. We got things challenged in state court and federal court. It's all judge shopped, by the way. Judges don't randomly get these cases. There's a reason that these cases are filed in Boston, the Boston court, or a certain district, Rhode Island, because they know they're going to get a judge.
That's the right point. Should the president, the singular president, should he have to share the presidency with 300 district court judges? No.
If a district court judge rules in a way that the president dislikes, should the president listen or should the president defy?
If a district court judge tries to usurp the authority of the chief executive of this country, he should absolutely defy it. There's a difference between broad policy decisions and discrete disputes between parties. That's the difference. If I want a policy decided, I'll take it to the Supreme Court.
What about checks and balances? While we litigate this, we're going to put a hold on the actions that you took that might be unconstitutional.
So while we litigate this, I'm a judge and I'm in charge of the executive branch and you're not, forget it. I totally disagree.
You can't compel the executive branch to spend the dollars. You can't do that. They can't say we're going to start, the judges are going to start writing the checks.
Have you heard the...
No matter who the president is, the duly elected chief executive of this country, they should not be sharing the broad plenary powers of the presidency with 300 individual district court judges. That is not what the people want.
That is a great...
Congress creates an agency in the executive branch, the FBI, let's say, and then the Congress funds it. Well, who's responsible for running the agency? Well, if you listen to the Washington Post, or if you listen to the New York Times, or if you listen to most people on these panels, it's the bureaucrats. The unelected bureaucrats that nobody knows operating in the shadows. No, actually, the chief executive is responsible for running the agency, for how the money is spent. These people love to audit you. You heard it from Senator Kennedy there in the cold open. Yeah, they rushed to sign legislation that makes sure there's 80,000 more IRS agents to make sure you're doing it by the book, to make sure you're not in any way cheating on your taxes. And then you audit them, and their heads explode. The swamp hates being audited. They're fighting tooth and nail to prevent from being audited. You've got judges saying you can't. You've got judges telling the Treasury Secretary he can't look into the books at the Treasury. It's exposing so much, isn't it? Not just that America's broke. I mean, we know that. But the level of corruption among the so-called civil servants. They're just there to serve, are they? Are they serving Americans? Are they serving their country? Why DOGE is unconstitutional. This is the Washington Post. DOGE is rapidly becoming perhaps my favorite government agency ever. And it's just a temporary thing. They're only planning to go, I think, through the middle of 2026. I mean, when I first heard it, I thought, well, that's not enough time. And then you look at what they've done in 2 weeks. How does anyone look at Elon Musk and say, he's the world's richest man? He's got a financial buffer that would protect him and his own if the United States collapsed entirely. And yet here he is in his sleeping bag, sleeping at the Treasury or wherever. He doesn't need the money. He doesn't need the hassle. He doesn't need all the criticism and the attacks. But he's getting in there and saying, look, we're paying Social Security to people that are 150 years old. In other words, they're dead. What's going on? Why is this happening? How is this happening? How do you contract with someone for a 3-month job and then end up paying them for 10 years, 20 years? Answer: make sure the job is for the federal government. How do you send out all of these $10,000 subscriptions to Politico? I mean, it is the pro package, so I assume it's worth $10K. And yeah, all these government employees, they're happy to subscribe because, well, it's on the government. Taxpayers are paying for it. And oh, by the way, it helps Politico survive, even as it loses its readership. You peel back the scab and you see that the cancer has spread throughout the body. It makes me think of all those articles in the Trumpet back in the 1990s by the late J. Tim Thompson. As he said, look, a borrower is a servant to the lender. You're putting yourself in captivity. You're putting yourself in slavery. $1 trillion. Even when Mr. Thompson was writing those articles in the 90s, I forget what the national debt was at that time. I think it was easily in the single digits as far as trillions go. Now we're at 36 trillion and we're paying $1 trillion per year in interest. So here comes the Washington Post. Listen, DOGE is unconstitutional. Reckless spending like you're a drunken sailor. Well, that's okay. I mean, we're used to that. That's been going on for decades. I guess that's constitutional. What is not debatable is that Congress has not authorized this radical overhaul, and the protocols of the Constitution do not permit statutorily mandated agencies and programs to be transformed or reorganized out of existence without congressional authorization. Where was this in 2009? The dear leader comes in and says, I'm going to fundamentally transform the United States. You didn't have any Washington Post pieces back then saying, I don't think that's constitutional, dear leader. You've got to get congressional authority. No, Obama, he would brag. I have a pen and a phone. I don't need Congress. How do you graduate Columbia and head into the world or the field of journalism and listen to two unbelievably successful businessmen? They've run companies, billion-dollar companies. And they get up there and they say, we have discovered waste and fraud at USAID, at the Treasury, the Department of Education, all of it. And everybody knows it. That's why we're running a $2 trillion per year deficit. Where does the money go? Well, ordinary Americans are worried about that. They're concerned about that. But evidently, if you graduate Columbia and you head into a job at MSNBC, you love fraud and waste. You love treachery. You love it when traitors rob the Treasury. What is wrong with these people? How could anybody in their right mind not listen to Elon Musk and say, world's richest man, here's what he did to Twitter. He slashed and burned. The company's successful. Now he's helping. He's advising President Trump. He doesn't even have a position of authority. But he's just saying, USAID, that needs to be filed away in file 13, the garbage can. How can the radical overhaul Trump and Musk are undertaking be reconciled with our constitutional order? Quite simply, it cannot be. So the Post, waxing eloquent about the constitutional order, we just think of that word alone. 1 Corinthians 14 talks about God being a God of decency and orderliness. How in your right mind could you say that the Treasury is orderly and going by the books if you've got, as Elon Musk said, all of these payments going out and no subject line? There's no explanation as to who it's for, what it's going for, and in some cases, they're just sending out the Social Security checks to nobody, to dead people, to people 150 years old. We've become a banana republic. Yeah, it's happened. It's here. It's here. And good for Musk and good for Trump to identify the evil and to confront it, to address it. But I'm sad to say it's too little too late. Think about how this makes Congress look. Because Congress has been spending the money. Congress has been approving these obscene budgets for the Department of Education, for the Treasury, for USAID. And they're going to be pushing hard here in about a month on this continuing resolution. And Donald Trump has said he wants a big, bold spending package. But if you just go and rubber stamp the spending package, even with Elon Musk saying this needs to stop, this payment needs to be ended, this contract needs to be severed. But if these agencies get the same amount of money and probably 10% more to keep up with inflation, what in the end has actually been cut? What has actually been trimmed? Okay, they're identifying the waste, the fraud, the abuse. You think Congress now is going to come along and say, well, if Elon Musk has trimmed $1 trillion, let's trim $1 trillion off of the allocated funds. How about that? Well, we'll see what they do. It certainly would have the support of the American people if they did do that. But my guess is, got to rush it through, got to get all of Trump's pet programs funded, got to get more money for the border security, etc. And again, it's like with anything in government, in the deep state, in the swamp. It's like with USAID. The few programs that actually went to worthwhile causes, that's held forward as, listen, you can't just wipe out this agency. Look at the good it does. When the truth of it is, it does what? Maybe 4 or 5% good? And 95% is part of the racket. Trump said so in that clip I just played. And Elon Musk was there. Yeah, there's kickbacks. That's illegal. You want to talk about the constitutional order. Listen to this from the presser yesterday. Elon Musk standing alongside President Trump at his desk. Clip 3.
You know, there's crazy things like just cursory examination of Social Security, and we've got people in there that are 150 years old. Now, do you know anyone who's 150? I don't. Okay. They should be on the Guinness Book of World Records. They're missing out. So, you know, that's a case where, like, I think they're probably dead. It's my guess. Or they should be very famous, one of the two. And then there's a whole bunch of Social Security payments where there's no identifying information. Well, like, why is there no identifying information? Obviously, we want to make sure that people who deserve to receive Social Security do receive it, and that they receive it quickly and accurately.
It's not just that it's going out to dead people. There's no identifying information. Why? Why wouldn't there be? Is that the way you run your finances? Supposing you were the steward of some wealthy millionaire and you've got his checkbook and you're just sending things off, no identifying information. This one's going to a 150-year-old. If the owner comes along and says, what are you doing? You couldn't get away with that. The U.S. government can. They'll hire more people to audit you. But as soon as you audit them, well, you see what's happening. You see how Obama-appointed judges respond. Listen to clip 5.
We have a case in New York where a hotel has paid $59 million, $59 million because it's housing migrants, illegal migrants, all illegal, I believe.
And they were being paid twice the normal room rate at 100% occupancy.
Unbelievable.
So it's a racket.
It's not even just that FEMA redirected $59 million to migrant lodging in New York City. They happily said, hey, we'll pay twice the going rate. Yeah, and well, the hotels there, hey, you can have every single room. 100% occupancy. How do you solve a problem such as this? How do you confront this kind of evil, whether it's the government or FEMA, to be more precise, or even the hotel? Where are the patriots? Where are the individuals willing to serve fellow man? You don't see them, do you? You go through Romans 12 and 13. I mean, that's a hard-hitting study. As Paul describes there, a true Christian living the spirit of God's love. Love is the fulfilling of God's law. And we don't see that. We don't see it. Even as I covered in class today, going through Romans 14 and 15, or 15 and 16, I guess it was. I mean, we're just living in a world full of negativity, of sorrow, misery, suffering, competition, strife, bitterness, envy, jealousy. That's why God says, fill up on the Spirit of God. Fill up on the hope of the resurrection, on the hope of God's coming kingdom. Be filled with the spirit of joy. That's not easy to do in this kind of a world we're living in. I mean, this world is in darkness. This is the United States of America. I remember years ago reading a biography on Calvin Coolidge. He was president about 100 years ago, and quite unlike every other president, they had a surplus at that time, and he said, all right, let's see what we can cut in terms of spending, and let's try to concentrate on saving. I was reading this book, and it was inspiring. I thought, how far removed are we from just basic common sense? Well, I never would have thought I'd see something like I'm seeing today with DOGE and Musk and even President Trump. He's said before he loves deficit spending. He loves debt. But Musk is coming in to his credit, and he wants to run it like he runs X or Tesla. I mean, you've got to make some difficult decisions if it's going to be a profitable company. And see how far that he gets. As I say, never thought I would see something such as this. But how can you, it shows how addicted to deficit spending, to accumulating debt, to just the fast food mentality of, hey, if it's something as nice sounding as U.S. aid, give it $40 billion. Just give it $40 billion. It shows how utterly ignorant people are when it comes to evaluating or judging human nature. They don't know the heart of man. God does. God says it's deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. It's interesting what, just as far as angles to this story go, there's even Democrats, prominent Democrats, saying this is political suicide. To rush to the defense of U.S. aid when there have been all these reports about how wasteful the spending has been and how it's going to these left-wing programs and even lining the pockets of George Soros, of all things. It's political suicide. And yet they have to defend it. So many of them, because why? Because they're on the take. Listen to this. This This is what really gets under their skin, the regime, Democrat, the uniparty, even some of these corrupt judges, these agencies that don't want you to look at their books. You listen to what Musk is saying here, and you can see why they're in such a difficult position. Yeah, it's not like I want to defend wasteful spending, but I mean, we've got to keep these crimes covered. This is clip 4.
Well, we do find it sort of rather odd that there are quite a few people in the bureaucracy who have ostensibly a salary of a few $100,000, but somehow manage to accrue tens of millions of dollars in net worth while they are in that position, which is, what happened at USAID. We're just curious as to where it came from. Maybe they're very good at investing, in which case we should take their investment advice, perhaps. But just there seems to be mysteriously they get wealthy. We don't know why. Where does it come from? And I think the reality is that they're getting wealthy at the taxpayer expense. That's the honest truth of it.
And we're going to look into it, he says. And Trump backs him up. How do these individuals making a couple $100,000 a year, how do they become worth tens of millions of dollars, in some cases in just 3, 4, 5 years? How do they know when to sell their stocks or when to purchase other ones? How do they always know the exact time to unload all of these stocks that are just about to plummet in price? How do they become so obscenely wealthy? How are they worth tens of millions? I saw a tweet the other day. The Pelosi's worth 200 million. The Schumer's worth 90-some million. How is this possible? They're civil servants, right? They're serving the American people. But what if they became unbelievably wealthy, fabulously rich, at the taxpayer's expense? That's what Musk said right there. Is that, does that align with the constitutional order? Is this what the framers had in mind? Listen to, skip ahead to clip 9.
No, the stuff we're doing with the Treasury Department is so basic that you can't believe it doesn't exist already. So for example, like I mentioned, just making sure that when a payment goes out, it has to have a payment categorization code. It's like, what type of payment is this? You can't just leave the field blank. Currently, many payments, the field is left blank. And you have to describe what's the payment for, some basic rationalization. That also is left blank. So this is why, the Pentagon, when's the last time the Pentagon passed an audit? I mean, a decade ago, maybe? Ever? Really? And we want to just, in order to actually pass audits, you have to have financial information that allows you to trace the payments.
The stuff we're doing with the Treasury is so incredibly basic, we can't believe it's not being done. Just knowing where the money is going. just writing out on the subject line like you would on a check. This payment is for such and such. Common sense. A common sense agenda. The only ones that would fight this are ones that are becoming fabulously wealthy at the taxpayer's expense. Listen to Jesse Waters last night as he explained how the deep state racket works. Clip 11.
Elon says DOGE also canceled a $17 million contract to provide tax policy advice to Liberia. $17 million to help Africans do their taxes. We even paid college tuition for Al-Qaeda. We gave a jihadi a full ride to Colorado State. Here's how the shell game works. You get taxed. Congress sends your money to a federal agency. The agency sends it to a Democrat nonprofit. The nonprofit president takes a fat salary, sends some of it to a subcontractor, and donates the rest to Democrats.
It's a racket. And Musk said that last night when he talked about the hotel rooms. FEMA's happy to pay twice the rate. The hotel's happy. They give them 100% occupancy. And as Musk said, it's a racket. People getting kickbacks. So much fraud, so much waste, so much abuse. It's an unconstitutional disorder. That's what it amounts to. This is not a constitutional order that the Washington Post is concerned about. They want for the status quo to continue. They want all of this money to be funneled into, laundered into these Democrat NGOs. He had a discussion, Jesse did, with Glenn Greenwald. And here's that from last night, clip 12.
I think the dynamic here, Jesse, is that there is this part of our government that is completely unaccountable to the elected officials who are supposed to govern our country, that you call the administrative state, you call the deep state. Really, there are both of them. And they operate completely unto themselves. This is why when DOGE shows up at U.S. aid, their argument and posture is, how dare you from the White House come and try and scrutinize what we're doing? And this is the way that Washington really runs. You can vote for one party or the other, and these same agencies are off on their own doing the real business of the government without anyone really knowing. And this is what is being threatened. And I think this is the reason why Democrats are so upset and so angry, because so much of this is now being exposed. And this is what has been so crucial to carrying out an agenda that has nothing to do with the American people or what they vote for, which is this huge part of the government that just does what it wants without accountability.
Notice he used the word exposed there. That's one we've been using quite often. God allowed what he did in 2020 to expose all of this corruption, all of this criminal activity happening inside the deep state, inside these bloated bureaucracies where the money just keeps right on flowing. We had an article at the Trumpet just a few weeks ago. Will the DOGE agency help President Trump get control of his divided government? It's certainly exposing so much of the filth. It's certainly exposing it. We'll see, again, what level of success they're able to have in returning the power to the presidency and eliminating so many of these wasteful programs. If you, as I touched on earlier, if you just watch that entire 30-minute presser, take note of the tone that the reporters take when they're asking questions, even what they ask. It's like Sundance says at Conservative Treehouse, the way they present the structure of their questions is, I mean, you read between the lines and you see that they support the fraud and the waste. It's Elon Musk that should be questioned. It's Elon Musk that should be criticized, that should be attacked. Certainly not the unidentified bureaucrats working at these agencies spending billions and billions of your taxpayer dollars. Sundance says it's amazing how the media reporters present the structure of their questions to support the waste, fraud, and abusive systems within the administration of government as it is outlined. And then he says, we do not dislike media enough. If it's possible to dislike media even more, I mean, listen to the presser yesterday. And see the way, as I said in class this morning, it's mind-boggling to me that you don't have people in the press room saying to Elon Musk, you know, thank you. You're the world's Instead, you get ones asking, well, what about your contracts with the Pentagon? I think there's a conflict of interest here. As if Elon doesn't get a contract with the Pentagon, he's going to go belly up financially. He's the world's richest man. What about what you said regarding Gaza? It's actually Mozambique, where all this waste spending has been carried out. Well, is that any better? Who educates these people? And why do they hate their country so much? The fruits, whether it's Musk or Trump, the fruits speak for themselves. They've been successful. They've employed a lot of people. And when we visited Mar-a-Lago last year, we had some of the people that were very familiar with Donald Trump, knew him well, talked about just how much the employees, whether it's at the golf club or wherever, they love working for Donald Trump. They love working for a successful businessman. We don't dislike the media enough, Sundance says. Listen to the media as they spar with Elon Musk last night, clip 6.
Mr. Musk, the White House says that you will identify and excuse yourself from any conflicts of interest that you may have. Does that mean that you are, in effect, policing yourself? What are the checks and balances that are in place to ensure that there is accountability and transparency? But if there is a conflict of interest when it comes to you yourself, for instance, you've received billions of dollars in federal contracts when it comes to the Pentagon, for instance, which the president, I know, has directed you to look into.
Yeah.
Are you policing yourself in that? Is there any sort of accountability check and balance in place that would provide any transparency for the American people?
Your detractors, Mr. Musk,
What?
including a lot of Democrats,
I have detractors?
you do, sir,
I don't believe it.
say that you're orchestrating a hostile takeover of government and doing it in a non-transparent way. What's your response to that criticism?
Well, first of all, you couldn't ask for a stronger mandate from the public. The public voted, we have a majority of the public voting for President Trump. We won the House, we won the Senate. The people voted for major government reform. There should be no doubt about that. That was on the campaign. The president spoke about that at every rally. The people voted for major government reform, and that's what people are going to get. They're going to get what they voted for.
I was telling the students this morning, you watch this. I didn't read the Musk biography. I don't know much about Tesla or his companies. You obviously know about him because he's famous. But you watch this press conference, you see him with his little son, you see him making sacrifices for the good of the country, and in my mind, it's easy to get a little emotional. Why is he doing this? He doesn't have to. He doesn't need to. He doesn't need to come under all this scrutiny. But there are other reporters. Your critics say you have carried out a hostile takeover of the U.S. government. No, that actually has already happened. And Donald Trump, he's trying to pull the power back to the people. The hostile takeover was going on for decades. The communist infiltration. Of all the questions, considering the fraud that they've uncovered, of all the questions the reporters could have asked, what do they ask? Well, I mean, what about your hostile takeover of the government here? Can you be trusted? Isn't there a conflict of interest? Listen to Representative Mike Lawler as he talks about U.S. aid and what it was spending its money, your money, taxpayer money, what U.S. aid was spending money on, clip 17.
But then you look at some of the expenditures by USAID. For instance, I uncovered over $3 million to a rap artist in Gaza producing anti-Israel, anti-Semitic songs. Is that the best use of American taxpayer dollars? I would venture not. And so one of the things that we're going to do in this hearing tomorrow, obviously, is go through what actually is the role of USAID, what should they be focused on, and frankly, what have they been focused on?
Taxpayer-funded, Jew-hating rap songs produced in Gaza. You think there would be a reporter in that presser yesterday that would say, Mr. Musk, what else have you discovered? We heard about the rapper in Gaza that's receiving U.S. funding. And he's singing all these anti-Semitic songs This is criminal. Here we're trying to bring peace between Gaza and Israel. It sounds to me like we're fueling the fire of discontent, of hatred, animosity, division, strife. They can't be bothered with actually going through the receipts and asking legitimate questions about it. Listen to this from the presser yesterday as well, clip 7.
If a judge does block one of your policies, part of your agenda, will you abide by that ruling? Will you comply with that?
I always abide by the courts, and then I'll have to appeal it. But then what he's done is he slowed down the momentum, and it gives crooked people more time to cover up the books. You know, if a person's crooked and they get caught, other people see that, and all of a sudden it becomes harder later on.
There's the other storyline that the regime media is pushing. The judges, the random judges, if they issue a ruling, will you abide by it? And Trump said, yeah, I will. But look at what they're doing. They're stalling. If someone's crooked and they're exposed and they're fired or they're prosecuted, that tends to reduce the level of criminality. People hear and fear. But no, the reporter, whoever it was, says, now, just so that you know, if there's a judge in Rhode Island, you're gonna abide by that ruling, aren't you? Listen again to this from yesterday, clip 10.
Mr. Musk, you said on X that an example of the fraud that you have cited was $50 million of condoms was sent to Gaza. But after fact-check this, it apparently Gaza in Mozambique, and the program was to protect them against HIV. So can you correct the statements? It wasn't sent to Hamas, actually. It was sent to Mozambique, which makes sense why condoms was sent there.
Yeah.
And how can we make sure that all the statements that you said were correct, so we can trust what you say?
Well, first of all, some of the things that I say will be incorrect and should be corrected. So nobody's going to bat 1,000. I mean, we will make mistakes, but we'll act quickly to correct any mistakes. I'm not sure we should be sending $50 million worth of condoms to anywhere, frankly. I'm not sure that's something Americans would be really excited about. And that is really an enormous number of condoms, if you think about it.
There's your big gotcha moment. First of all, listen to him. What he said right there in that response shows more humility than practically anything I've ever heard the regime media say ever. When have you ever heard a journalist say, well, first of all, some things I say will be incorrect and they'll need to be corrected. This is the world's richest man. He didn't have to say that. And then he goes on to say, just because they're going to Mozambique instead of Gaza, I'm not sure that's much better. $50 million worth of condoms to Mozambique, thanks to U.S. aid. And there's the reporter lady saying, now, how can we, if you got Mozambique wrong, how can we trust you? How can we trust anything that you say? The structure, as Sundance said, of their questioning tells you everything you need to know. The New York Times this morning, appearing with Trump, Musk makes broad claims of federal fraud without proof. The New York Times, not convinced. The New York Times can't really say there's even any fraud. I think we're spending the trillions and trillions and trillions. Every member in Congress knows there's fraud, there's waste, there's pork barrel spending. But here's the New York Times recycling the old canard without evidence, saying it without evidence. Here the administration is possibly the most accessible administration in the history of presidents, in the history of presidential administrations, giving impromptu pressers to anyone that wants to attend, opening up the White House press pool to all kinds of independent journalists. stopping at the press pool it seems like 3-4 times a day. I mean, you forget almost that Donald Trump sits down with the King of Jordan yesterday. And then he goes into the presser with Elon Musk. I mean, he's barely 3 weeks into his presidency. He's like a hurricane of activity. That's another point, another takeaway. Look at what it's exposing. Look at, again, not to finish on a downer here, but look at the sickness that this is revealing. That article from 2024, just a couple months ago. Donald Trump has exposed a breathtaking amount of corruption in the federal government. This is the piece that we had on DOGE. It says it's refreshing to see America wake up to the fact that it must balance its budget and shrink its government. Yet the resurgence brought about by this end-time Jeroboam will only be temporary unless the American people make some permanent changes. I mean, when you look at the multiple levels of corruption, you see the need, obviously, for permanent change, for a change in man's nature. I mentioned Tim Thompson, all those articles he wrote in the 1990s. This one here was in the March 2000 Trumpet. Shortly before Mr. Thompson died, he died, I think, in 2001 or 2, I forget the exact date, but he wrote about the snare of debt. And he cites Deuteronomy 28, verses 43 to 52, which show that foreigners will end up owning so many of America's assets and so much of its debt, or at least loaning to America so much that America can sustain its debt, and that we'd eventually be besieged by these foreigners. Musk talked about the Treasury and all the blank checks that go to people across America and abroad to the tune of billions and billions of dollars. It references Proverbs 18 and verse 11 and Ecclesiastes 7 and verse 12. I'll let you look up these scriptures later. But Mr. Thompson wrote, we're told in 1 Timothy 6 to 10, that wrong financial dealings are a snare waiting to snap shut on the unwise, and that it will produce great sorrow. It's like a snare. It's an addiction. There's a lot of people in the swamp addicted to the money laundering, addicted to the handouts, addicted to the freebies, addicted to the kickbacks. Mr. Thompson says, right now, this wonderful nation of America is in a great deal of danger because of the snare of debt. I mean, you could have looked at that in the year 2000 and scoffed, I suppose. Or you can even look back at it and scoff and say, well, you know, we've managed. 25 years on from that, we've managed. We're still around. We're still here. $36 trillion in debt. $1 trillion per year to just pay off the interest in the many loans that we've made over the years to sustain this level of deficit spending. $2 trillion deficit every year, $1 trillion every year to pay the interest. And in the next 10 years, $13.8 trillion on interest alone. There have been many articles over the years at the Trumpet magazine on this very subject. If you aren't a subscriber, make sure that you call our operators today and subscribe to the Trumpet magazine. The number is 1-866-930-3024. That's all we have time for on today's show, the fastest moving hour in broadcasting. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. Thank you for joining us on today's show, and we'll see you again tomorrow.